Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today's video is a little bit of a different one as it's a reaction and a response to another YouTuber's video. Now, in this case, we're talking about Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I've worked with Alex in the past. He is amazing at what he does. Love his content in general, and it's a channel that I do consistently watch. And he puts out a weekly video where it's a roundup of all of his thoughts and his news. So if you haven't subscribed to Alex, go take a look at his channel. He's wonderful at what he does. So this most recent video that he did talk about was a roundup video where he talked about all of the news, etc. And this week in review, one of his main topics was modulating skill around players. Now, in this video, he talks specifically about Legacy of You, and I wanted to share my thoughts on the Legacy of You system in general, as well as some answers to the questions that he brought up. So while watching Alex's video, the 4 questions were: can you actually win the game of Legacy of You? Is the first scenario a waste of time? Is the game playing you? And how should difficulty scale in a Legacy game? We're going to answer all of those questions during this video, but if you haven't already, do make sure that you are subscribed to Alex's channel. I think he does a wonderful job at his presentation and in general his thoughts, clarifying his critiques about different games. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel here at SideGame LLC, make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's go ahead and get into the video. Before we begin, I do want to do a quick overview of what Legacy of You is if you haven't played it and you're just looking for a general idea of what this game is. So Legacy of You is a legacy game, go figure, that's solo only, where your goal is to construct canals on the Yellow River, and you're doing this through the use of these multi-use cards that are going to be generating you resources, allowing you to gain income, as well as you're going to be discarding them to get immediate bonuses. So they also serve as the life force of your deck, because that's one of the lost conditions that you're going to be juggling. So you're trying to make sure your deck survives, trying to defeat these barbarians that will be attacking you at the top of the board here and outrun this wave that is chasing your ship. So your goal is to develop the canal enough, make it to the very end, and then once you've done that, you've completed that scenario. So that's the idea behind Legacy of You. Now let's talk about the legacy portion. So in Legacy of You, a lot of the cards are going to have this golden turtle on them, and that's going to say, hey, if you see this number, instead of getting a reward or something like that, normally you would get resources or something, you're going to look into the book and it's going to give you something that you're going to earn, and that's going to maybe be cards. I'm not going to get into any heavy spoilers as to what these exact things are, but I'm going to give you an idea of the general feelings of what these unlocks will do and how they'll affect the legacy system. So let's quickly get into the first question that Alex had is, can you win the game? Now my answer is very simple for this one. Yes, you can win the game. So I've played it through entirely twice at this point. I've completed one by losing 3 games, I think, 2 or 3 games, and then the other one I've completed by losing a single game. And light spoilers here, you can afford to lose 1 single game and still get like the highest victory at the end. So that's something to be aware of. You get 1 loss and then you can still win the entire campaign. So that is super possible. In the first, every time you lose this game, you're going to unlock something that is going to make you super strong, basically give you some ability that's going to lean into a specific aspect of the game. And so that's something to be aware of. And that's going to be different each time you play, because once you get a bunch of these abilities, you're honestly going to be pretty unstoppable once you understand the system. Now, here's the second question that Alex has is the first scenario a waste of time? And I'm going to say no, the first scenario is not a waste of time. First off, in my first playthrough, I lost the first scenario, but in my second playthrough, I did win the first scenario. But here's the important part. When you are playing Legacy of You, the biggest portion and the biggest thing that you can do during that first scenario is you can solve a lot of the story beats in the game. So if you are going to lose the first scenario, if you're playing and you realize, oh, there's no way I'm winning this, then what do? You shift gears and you say, let's try to solve as many of these story things as I can as possible. And that's what you do. You're going to say, okay, I know that I'm going to lose to the barbarians in 2 rounds, so let's dedicate my resources to defeating barbarians with story things, because maybe they have something that occurs based on whether or not you defeat them or not. Maybe I need to make as many huts as possible because there are potentially story things on the back of those. Maybe I need to do this specific condition. There are cards that can show up in the game that may provide different obstacles that you have to complete. So your first portion, if you think you're going to lose, accept it, because it's okay to lose 1 scenario, because that'll give you an amazing power-up that's essentially going to carry you for the whole rest of the game, and just dedicate that time to unlocking story bits. So as you first play this, it might seem that it just is a waste of time because you are going to lose, but because you can make progress and dedicated progress to the campaign bits, it is not a waste of time, and it totally matters what you do in that first scenario, as it is going to set you up for success in later games. This is a great time to bring up another legacy game that does this really well. This is Pandemic Legacy. Now, Alex did reference this in his video. And in Pandemic Legacy, it does something similar where, yes, you can lose a mission, you can lose a scenario, but if you made progress on the board, if you built certain buildings, added certain stickers, completed maybe half of an objective, that's a pretty big deal because that's going to propel you forward into victory in future scenarios. It's okay to take a loss now if that means it's going to set yourself up for victory. And that's a big thing in Legacy of You, particularly in those early missions, as a lot of the hard stuff is going to show up and hit you randomly. And you're like, oh my gosh, this sucks. So that's a big thing to be aware. There's a great question down in chat. How long did the first scenario take you to get through? Each game is a single scenario, and they honestly take about 45 minutes to an hour is what I've experienced. And that's all scenarios take about that much time. So yeah, great question here. So I think that Pandemic Legacy does a wonderful job of this and does one of the best things that a legacy system can do. And that's by giving you little objectives that you can complete during the game, but not necessarily you have to win the entire thing every single game, every single time. So that's a big deal when it comes to legacy game systems and legacy games design. And that is something that Legacy of You offers you, tiny objectives that you can complete in those early rounds, even if you are going to lose. So the next thing that I want to talk about is his third scenario, his third question is the game playing you? And this is an interesting question because I'm going to say in the first half of the game, no, the game is not playing you. But then in the second half of the game, yes, the game is absolutely playing you. And that's one of the reasons that I can't rate it super highly. Now, here we go. I'm just going to show you my total review and my final thoughts for the game and what I have on BGG. So my entire rating here for Legacy of You is a 7 out of 10. And that's because that first half is so strong. So here's my review. I'm just going to read it verbatim here. So minor spoilers. Legacy of You system is fun to get familiar with and opens up when you start losing games as you unlock more functionality and multi-use to your cards. The beginning and middle games I find a lot of fun as you're unlocking new things constantly, adding more cards to the pool, but it suffers from repetitive gameplay in the last third as most of the victory cards will simply add more barbarians to the enemy deck and not change or adjust the tools that you actually have as a player while keeping those objectives the same. I wish the victory cards would add more tools and options to the player to use in addition to additional challenge to overcome with this. And this is the root of my problem with Legacy of You, is that the objectives don't change. There's cards that add an additional smaller objective. That's honestly not really something you have to worry too much about, but that is something that you'll have to finish. But overall, the core game loop is get things out, generate resources, build your deck with a bunch of cards so that you can get rid of cards in the later stages of the game, and then slide things under those income spots so you're generating enough resources to make that final push on those final three. Eventually, the gameplay loop stops discovering things. Your deck of campaign cards, there's none left. Like you've done everything. And so my last 4 or 5 games of each of the playthroughs that I've made, all that happens is I do the exact same things because it is the best way to win with the special card that I unlock from losing. And it's just repeating the gameplay. And that's awful. I hate that. It's so dumb because that's my last 4 games are exactly the same. It sucks. And it's just playing 4 hours of the same monotonous loop. And so I don't think I'll ever complete another game of Legacy of You. I played it a second time just to be sure, but I don't think I'll ever do a full campaign of Legacy of You again. What I'm going to do probably is play that first half, and I should adjust my review to the first half now because now that I've played the game and I understand how it works, there is a set path to victory. But I don't think I'm ever going to play through that second half of the game again. Once I've done all those story beats, I'm going to stop, reset it, and then hope that I get a different card that gives me something, a different thing to explore in the game state. That's one of the things that happens when you lose is you'll unlock something that gives you new functionality, whether it be to the worker spaces on the board or your cards in hand. In my first campaign, I had something that affected the cards in my hand, and that was just ridiculous because I just spammed the heck out of that and just steamrolled the rest of the campaign. And then in the second one, I unlocked something that affected on the boards. And so I just made sure I did that on the board. And it kind of sucks because now if you don't do that thing on the board, you're not using your catch-up mechanism bonus that you've unlocked. And that just means that you're not actually making any real choices. I'm going to compare this game to Hadrian's Wall for a little bit. This is another Garfield game, and it's going to be my strongest recommendation to you for this solo experience because of what it does and how it's going to change the overall feeling of the game from game to game. So Hadrian's Wall is a roll and write game where you are presented with so many different options, but the game condition is the same. You have to just get the most points. That's it. But they have added something called the solo campaign here that is going to give you new objectives, new special rules, things that you can actually use your workers towards. And this is something that I think Legacy of You drastically needs. They need a solo campaign like this to change the win condition. It cannot be just make sure that you complete the canal. Otherwise, that same thing is going to happen every single time you make it to that midway point. Once you reach the, okay, I just need to repeat this and then I'll win the campaign point of your journey. And I think that's something that it needs drastically, whether this be a promo pack of cards, whether it be something that fundamentally changes the system, like an expansion or something like that. Legacy of You needs a campaign system like this where the challenges and the objectives are going to change constantly. The objective is the same every time you play Legacy of You, and that's going to get pretty boring pretty dang quickly, which is really unfortunate. So that is the game playing you section. And then the last question that Alex had here was, how should difficulty scale in a legacy game? Now I'm going to go back to like the pandemic legacy games and this one. I love the concept of legacy games giving tools to the players. In pandemic legacy, they're the cards. In the Legacy of You, they're going to be additional bonus abilities for some aspect of the game. But I think that this one does not offer enough. And this was going to go back to my Legacy of You final thoughts here, where I wish that this game is not only going to offer you tools to tackle different things, but also new objectives to tackle with those tools. And I want to see that on both sides, on the winning and the losing. And this is something that Pandemic Legacy does really well, where in Legacy of You, if you win something, that's just going to add usually some cards that you have to defeat or something extra in the enemy deck, and that's just there, and you just have to deal with it. And usually, because you have this busted ability now, if you just spam the heck out of it, you're probably going to be able to deal with it pretty easily, but there's no additional tools that you get to tackle this thing. It's just using the same stuff that you already have. And then on the inverse side, if you lose, you get an ability, and then that just becomes a thing that you do for the rest of the game. There's no additional objective or condition that you have to stop with those things you're unlocking. Things like Pandemic Legacy, without getting into any spoilers, they are going to move. They just move, and they give you things on both sides. Hard things and easier things. Not hard things and easier things. Things to make it difficult while giving you tools to tackle that difficulty. So with that in mind, I think that difficulty in a legacy game should always scale. It should continuously scale, but on both sides. More challenging things, but more tools to take on those challenging things. So those are the different questions that Alex had over in his video with, can you win the game? Short answer, yes, you can win the game. And I think that it actually is really easy to win the game after you play through it maybe like 2 or 3 times and understand the game flow. You just got to keep your deck big at the beginning one. Don't get rid of any cards, just add them all to your deck, and then just spam the heck out of huts. And then when you do get your one loss that you're allowed, it'll give you some condition that says, oh, this is the thing you could do to get 1,000,000 points. Do that. So that's just something to be aware of. And that's only losing once, which is crazy because you can lose like 6 times and still technically win the campaign. It's just not on like the highest difficulty or something like that. So you get 1 loss if you just want to win it the highest tier. But if you just want to win, then you can lose 6 games, which makes you like a god in the game because you have 1,000,000 superpowers. It's crazy. Next thing is the first scenario a waste of time? No, it is not a waste of time. Use that time to further yourself in your other endeavors, getting through those story cards, getting rid of some of the worst ones that are going to remove stuff later. And you'll understand what these are after you've played like maybe 1 or 2 times. You'll see a story and be like, oh my gosh, this sucks. And now you remember that person's face or that card's ability and be like, okay, that's what I got to do for that. So not a waste of time. Use that time to get yourself propelled for future scenarios. Very similar to Pandemic Legacy, with like building buildings and preparing for future rounds. Is the game playing you? Yes, in the first, no in the first half, yes in the second half. No, because you're actually making choices on what to mitigate in that first portion. But once you unlock that ability, then yes, forever, because you're just going to do that line of play because the objectives never change, which is pretty unfortunate. And then lastly, how should difficulty scale in a legacy game? Difficulty needs to scale on both sides. It needs to make the game harder, but also give the players new tools to allow them to tackle these new challenges. My thoughts on Legacy of You in general. I'm curious to hear what you think about Legacy of You. Is this a game that you're enjoying playing? What are your answers to these questions? I'll leave comments in the description below and let me know what you think about these questions. So can you win the game? Is the first scenario a waste of time? Is the game playing you? And how should difficulty scale in a legacy game? And Alex, if you're watching this in the future, thanks for checking it out. And I'm curious to hear what your responses are or your thoughts to these questions. But thank you so much for watching. I'll leave the stream open for just a little bit more. And that way we can see if there's any questions or anything like that on the live stream. But otherwise, I'll wrap it up here in a second. That's good water. And real talk, I do think that the game is pretty dang good. for like this first foray into a campaign experience for solo only from Garphill Games. And I want to see more games like this, but with the addition of those Hadrian Wall objectives changing, because they've done it before in that system, just not with a legacy system layered on top. So I want to see that added variability. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the stream now. Thank you so much for watching, and let me know what you think. SideGame Strong, y'all.